but I try to be. Okay, well, welcome today to the Yamhill County Leaders Roundtable. Thanks again to McMinnville Community Media for live streaming us. Bill, thank you. Thanks, Mayor Beth Wojtowski, for keeping us all actually on this page. I want to go around real quick and do introductions. On my circle, we have Representative Ron Noble. We've got me, Commissioner Casey Kula. We've got Representative David Gomberg. We've got Commissioner Rick Olson. We've got Mayor Michael Cape. We've got Mayor Michael Cape of Amity. We have Abishah Stone of Segcor. We've got Senator Arnie Roblin. We've got Representative Bill Post. I'm so sorry. And we have Mayor Beth Wojtowski from Dayton. Thank you for joining us all today. And I am, I don't know about you, but I'm also, in addition to being inundated by overlapping phone calls, I'm also inundated with draft guidance. So some of you can probably understand what I'm talking about here. Yeah, so maybe we'll be able to talk about that today. I know that Representative Noble needs to leave a little bit early, so maybe we can have Representative Noble go first and talk. What would you like to tell people in Yamhill County?
Well, I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, so I won't talk depth, because as most of us know, with this phase 1 reopening, there's a lot of information that's going around and a lot of information that's being sought. And I know that through a lot of avenues, Casey, some of the things that I think the rest of us are going to talk about today have to do with trying to gather information. I know that my office is gathering a lot of information regarding childcare. What does that look like in reopening childcare, retail, restaurants, outdoor recreation? And a lot of us want it to happen as soon as it can, but safely, so that we don't, so nobody gets hurt. We need to do it reasonable, and I appreciate that. But I field emails, and I'm sure most of us do, about when is it going to end? And we want to be safe, but when is this going to end? So I appreciate the process. I know there's a lot more to discuss. And then also the prerequisites for phased reopenings. I know that you probably heard some of that through the AOC today. And again, I won't go into detail, but the counties and the regions that are set up and the process for trying to get regions open in what that looks like. So that's the biggest message. A lot going on. Commissioner, you mentioned, I think before we went live, you know, the calls upon videos and Zooms and everything else. I think we're all ready for us to start getting back to whatever normal is going to look like. So with that, again, I think there's a lot of information that others have to share. I don't need to get into the woods here. I'll let, or too deep into the weeds. I'll let others do that.
Well, we could start. Thank you, Representative Noble. We could start by opening it for questions to you. If there's anything that folks want Representative Noble to tackle specifically.
Representative Noble, I have a question for you, and it's certainly an unfair question. So I'll start with that. So the prerequisites that just came out of the governor's office, I know that those just landed, and I have maybe had 3 minutes to review them myself. I'm curious, though, if you have any additional information that you can share with this group in regards to the, I'm going to get the language wrong because the document's not right in front of me, but essentially they've created regions, the kind of the healthcare regions.
Yes.
Within that prerequisite guideline. Can you please help to clarify for folks what that means?
Well, I just probably spent a little less time. I do have the document in front of me, however, and the regions, for those who aren't aware, there we go. Yamhill County is in Region 2, along with Polk, Lincoln, Benton, Marion, and Lynn County. And to be honest with you, my first thought was Marion County has had a lot of cases. Do we want to be lumped with Marion County? And that's a concern. Of course, Region 1 and in part of my House district is also Washington County, which is the same thing. So I don't know how we got broken up into regions, what that looks like. I have already seen Yamhill County commissioners making plans to work with other commissioners from other, with within our region to start the process. And I wish I had more details because I literally, I was in a 10 o'clock meeting. I printed this off because I saw it, and I haven't had a chance to really study it much before this meeting now.
Fair enough. Thank you for that. And some of the information that I heard was conflicting, and so kind of throughout this call, if anyone is able to offer some clarity at this point, that'd be great. So my question is, and to everyone, I see Representative Post might have something to add here, but is whether those regions are more so around the total support of hospital beds and tests and things like that, but each county is able to open independently, or if it's all or nothing in terms of reopening those counties within the region. And that's, I think, the sort of clarity that folks are going to be looking for sooner than later. And if anybody has access to that, that would be great. But thank you, Representative Noble. As I said, this is an unfair question because these prerequisites just came out. I'm just curious if folks have additional information.
Well, it's very possible. I know that I don't understand Lynn County or Benton County as much, but I could very easily understand Yamhill, Polk, and Marion, even with my comments regarding the COVID outbreak in Marion County, simply because that's part of our regional solutions region. It's our Mid-Valley Economic Recovery region. In McMinnville specifically, having worked in emergencies and first responders, I know that when McMinnville, the hospital here, gets backed up, we divert either them to Newburgh or to Salem, so that from a regional hospital healthcare perspective, that makes sense. I couldn't really talk about what the other counties and how we got lumped together other than being Mid-Valley.
Representative Noble, this is Mary Starrett. I had a question about the plans that have been submitted so far by other counties. We heard on the call with the governor's office this morning that the plans that were submitted by a number of different counties who work together as their loosely formed collaboratives, that they were going to be, quote, used as starting points, and that they're going to be standardized components, and that they would think about or consider an opening for them on May 15th. So my question to you is, if we're going to have standardized components, are we just filling in numbers and there's very little leeway or very little that we would add as a group of counties to get to that phase one place?
I would, at some point, if we make it so rigid, there's really no reason to have regions. And maybe I'm just being overly optimistic, but I would suggest that I would push that the regions should get together, the counties, and provide the solution that's best for the counties and for that region. I can understand the need for a starting point and a baseline, but I'm not sure that I would assume that that is going to be the same exact requirements. It may have the same topics and the same subjects that we need to deal with. But I would be really stepping beyond my capacity right now and in my knowledge of what's going on and what that's going to look like. Even though we're making some headway, Commissioner, you know that it seems to be that we get a little bit different version as the week progresses from Monday through Friday. Maybe it doesn't change hourly as much as, but I'm looking forward to see how this is going to be applied. Again, I've just seen the document and aware of some of this just today.
Thank you.
Representative Post, did you have a comment or a question?
There, unmute. Okay. To Ron's point about lumping Yamhill and Marion, I have a whole report that I'm going to give later, but I just want to address that for a moment because I am also confused outside of the obvious Mid-Valley lumpage that we normally do. I'm not comfortable with Marion and Yamhill being tied together. For those who don't know, my district is mostly Marion County. The only part of Yamhill I have is literally just Newburgh, nowhere outside of Newburgh. So the river is it. So I've spent a lot more time with the Marion County people because that's the vast majority of my district. Just so you have some numbers, this is as of this morning, the statewide incident rate. Now, maybe Senator Roblin, Rep. Gomberg, Rep. Noble can tell me more about incident rate. I don't know if that means everything from hospitalization to somebody that got sick to somebody died. I don't know. I just know that's what they told me. Incident rate. The incident rate statewide is right around 57 to 60 per 100,000. So hold that number in your mind for a minute. Marion County is at 115.6. So more than double. Kaiser is 135.4. So, and that's attributed to mainly the same thing in Newburgh, long-term care facilities. We had 2 big outbreaks in 2 different long-term care facilities here in Kaiser. And Kaiser is, I don't know how, I frankly probably should have looked this up a long time ago, how many long-term care facilities are. There's a lot. There's at least 9 that I know of. And so there's the issue. The other thing about Marion County that people have asked, why the outbreak in Marion County? The number 1 zip code is 97071. That's Woodburn. So Woodburn has the highest outbreak level, not incident level in Marion County. So yeah, I'm a little concerned. So the Marion County commissioners are being very hesitant about how they proceed next. So I'll leave it at that. I don't know why we're tied together, frankly.
Okay. Thank you, Representative. And somebody kind of given us there's 14 senior care facilities in McMinnville. And
That's me, Joya.
Yes, Joya.
I had to use this number.
134,826.
I'm not 134.8. Well, I figured out how to do it on my laptop instead of having to do it on my phone. So I have not seen this document that you're talking about, and I don't know where I can find it, but you're going to send it to me. Thank you. Okay, I'm done. I will read it over and get in touch with you later. Thank you.
I should say it is still, the copy I got today is still labeled draft. So I don't know if it's still ready to be, or still in the process of being modified. I would suggest that since we have the draft in our hands, it's probably pretty close to the final product, but it has not been finalized. And
I did note that in my in the subject line for the email, it said final prerequisites for opening, but the copy itself does say draft. So yeah. But I will send it in just a moment to you, Joya. And I noted I had received a voicemail that said something along the lines of that the health regions are a way primarily intended to share, as actually Representative Noble said, for sharing resources. And when I look through the grid, there's some things that are the statewide required, and then there's some things that are health region required, and then there's some things that are county required. And it looks like the column for health region is really more for sharing of the resources. So that was reassuring to me.
And it is the health regions. That's how it came up. We've got regions for everything. We've got ESD regions. We've got economic regions. We've got it all. And apparently there's always been this health region map out there as well. So that's what they use, because the people who are designing this are the people out of county and state health departments. So that's the one they knew. So that's where it came from. That's what I heard this morning.
Okay, any other questions for Representative Noble? We let him go first so that he could have the softball question.
That's right.
Part of it.
Well, thank you. I apologize for that.
And Representative Gomberg and Senator Roblin, do you want to ask any softball questions of Representative Noble while we're here?
I felt Representative Noble did an exceptional job given the softball question he was given. So I was impressed.
Thank you.
Do you have any thoughts, Representative, on? All right. Do you have any thoughts on the draft guidance? Were there any places for different sectors? Were there any places that you had comments from people that you directed to the governor's office that said, this is a no-go and this is why?
We've been pushing and seeking comments. We've got several hundred comments reaching out from my district. So I don't have time to necessarily collate them for you here. And we're in the process, like you are, Commissioner, in trying to get more information. I appreciate Joya assisting us with some of that collection as well. And we will keep pushing it and handing it off to the governor's office.
Yeah, thank you very much. And note that one of the things that we observed at the economic response team meeting yesterday was that there was a lot of language that was encouraged, strongly encouraged, as opposed to this is required or shall. So that softens it up a little bit. So Representative Post, you are all ready with your own notes and statements. What would you like to tell people today? And thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Okay, it's the bald guy committee.
That's right.
Oh, you've joined us. Holy cow. Nice. I like it. God made perfect heads and then he put hair on the rest. Anyway, sorry. Today, you probably saw already that, again, this is not in Yamhill County, but it's going to affect Yamhill County. The St. Paul Rodeo is, we knew it was coming, but St. Paul Rodeo is officially off. And that was devastating. Devastating, even though, again, I knew it was coming, to actually see it in black and white. I got a call last night from the board members and the chair of the board, and they were heartbroken. The devastation to a small town like St. Paul, I don't even know what it's going to be. So that was just really hard to pass on that information today. So because it's going to affect everybody in the region. The other is interesting, and maybe Shannon can help me on this. 99W Drive-In, Brian Francis. He really wants to open. Milton Freewater has opened, and 2 other drive-ins in the state have opened, most of them over east. I got from the governor's staff directly guidelines for how he could reopen. And I got those, it's May 1st, I got those on April 17th, I think it was, that were specific for him on how he could open. Today, he emailed me and said he's having problems with the city not approving that. So now Milton Freewater's drive-in is out in the middle of nowhere. I guess that's the difference. It's not in a populated area. But Brian is really frustrated. So Shannon, I don't know if maybe you can have any influence there, but that was note number 2 that I wanted to cover. And then number 3 is the big one that I talked to Commissioner Kola about. So back up a little bit, Marion County Commissioner Colin Willis, when he received the guidelines in the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 from the governor about a week ago, a little over a week ago, the first thing he saw was pubs, bars, restaurants, and assorted other industries. If they did this, they could do that. And he said, why aren't churches included? And for those of you who don't live in Newburgh, Newburgh is the most churched city west of the Mississippi. Most churches per capita. So it's a fairly big thing to open churches. And yet it wasn't being addressed by the governor. And so he asked, what can we do? And her staff said, form a work group, get some pastors, ministers, priests, rabbis, imams, you name it, and have a conference call and see what comes of that. Well, we had that conference call and I was invited to be on it on Monday. There were 110 faith leaders, ministers, rabbis, priests, you name it. And they were all very anxious to get church back in some way. The problem, I'm going to condense a long 2-hour call to just a couple minutes. The problem that we ran into was a couple of things. The governor's staff doesn't really understand what church is, which I hate to say, but it was amazing. Had never heard of Young Life. Who in Oregon doesn't know what Young Life is? It was founded in Oregon. It's created in Oregon. It lives in Oregon. It was part of Oregon. So I was a little disappointed in that. Didn't understand what the sacrament, the Holy Sacrament was, what communion was. So see, that's the base that we're starting on. If you don't understand what those things are and why that's so important, you're not going to understand why it's important to say churches are as or more important than pubs, bars, and restaurants. So what we concluded was, this is what we got hung up on. Rather than the 6-foot distancing, the governor's staff was stuck on 50. So of course we had a ton of ministers who have congregations that are far more than 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. We had one minister in Salem who has 5,600 people go to church every Sunday and has 9 buildings on his facility. And he figured out that with the rule of 50, if you had the Kingdom and you only put 50 people in there, who's gonna preach to 50? Anyway, they kept getting hung up on that 50 number rather than. And I sent the commissioner a document from one of the pastors whose church is around 2,000 and has 7 buildings on his facility. And he figured with the 6 foot plus 1 inch rule, as he put in place, and the proper social distancing, that he could have 521 people attend church on a Sunday under his thing that he put together. So Commissioner, thank you for the time. That was a big concern of mine. I have heard from so many constituents, when do I get to go back to church? Church is probably as important as any business there is in this state. People need to have it for their well-being, their mental health, and so many more things. And so I'm really concerned about that. And so I stuck my foot in it, and now the governor has put me on that work group, and this, which is fine. I love it. And I'm waiting to hear from more pastors. So that 110 ministers was just Marion County. So if you can imagine now, we open up to the whole state, that Zoom call is going to be, 1,000 people. So that's where we are, and I'd be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
I have a
Thank you.
question, actually a comment for Representative Post. Representative Post, you talked earlier about the opening and the effect it has on everybody, and the long-term care facilities having such an impact. Well, I know in Marion County, also much like Yamhill County, all 7 of our deaths have been from residents at the same facility. And if we take those and then the other people infected or shown signs of COVID from that facility, in Yamhill County, we've only had 16 cases total wide. So there has to be something where they can look at these and say, we're not going to base whether we reopen or what we do based on, we're not going to take those numbers from senior centers into consideration, because if they do that, like you said, Marion County, if you take the senior centers out and everything, it makes a big difference in Marion County's count. So it's like everybody is getting, I don't want to say punished, but everybody's living by the same rules when 90% of our rules apply to one facility. So that was my only comment or question.
Representative Post, do you want to add anything to that?
Not really. I mean, it's a fair point. It's one of the frustrating things. I keep going back to, deaths, obviously horrible, but deaths is not the number that we need to focus on. It's hospitalizations or potential hospitalizations. So I know that that's part of this equation and part of what the people are trying to make, how to make this work. It's what's the potential for hospitalizations, not so much the death count. Although of course the death count is horrible. So anyone, just one.
Thank you. Representative Post, I added or I forwarded on your document that the pastor shared with you to everybody who's on the screen right now. I was having a hard time getting it to everybody else. So.
Sure. And one of the things that I pointed out to the commissioner, and I point out to anybody who gets that Word document, the more I read it, so it was written for a church. It was a pastor went to his church, into his facility, and measured 6 feet 1 inch. And he literally put down tape and marked off every square inch of the entire facility. And he said, I could seat this many people with these guidelines. But the more I read that document, as I said to the commissioner, the more I said, this actually could work for any business, any organization, anything, if you use this simple set of guidelines. And basically, because it's not based on phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, it's relevant in all 3 phases. And there's no, well, when we do this, we'll get to phase 2. And if we do this, we'll get to phase 3. It's relevant for all 3 phases. And there's really no timeline on it if you just follow the guidelines. So I hope everybody gets a chance to see that, because it's really well thought out and brilliant. I have forwarded it to Senators Merkley and Wyden, to Congressman Schrader, Congressman Bonamici, Congressman Walden, I forget who else. And all of them have replied, we've not seen a plan like this.
Thank you very much. And it's forwarded to everybody here now. So I appreciate you sharing that. This really is, we have to share as much information, even though it's starting to fill my brain as possible. So thank you. I would love to go, how are we? Okay, we've got Representative Shannon Buckmaster.
A quick update. I was able to multitask here and at least address reopening 99W Drive-In Theater. So while they received the state guidelines for what it would look like to safely reopen on April 17th, Brian Francis just submitted his safety plan to the city yesterday, and the city is in the process of reviewing it and helping Brian implement the safety plans that he's proposed. So while it may not be this weekend or even next weekend, there is communication happening, and the city is just making sure that the plan that Brian is putting forward it's safe, right? We want our businesses to be successful and our residents to be safe. So there's progress, and the city is not inhibiting the reopening. They're reviewing the information as quickly as possible to be able to support Brian reopening. So hopefully that's helpful. And that's directly from City Manager Dan Weinheimer. So he's directly working with Mr. Francis.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, mine came from Brian this morning, literally just an hour before we stepped on. He asked in my state email if I could help. And I said, look, I did my part. I got the governor's guidelines. You now need to deal with the city.
I think you've done a great job, both of you. Thank you. I would love to go now to Senator Roblin, unless there are other questions for Representative Post. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Senator Roblin, what would you like to talk with people about today?
So this morning, I'm on the Governor's Economic Advisory Council. So we had our meeting today to review the first three of the guidelines. And those are the, as you know, restaurant, outdoor recreation, and retail. We didn't get through all of them, and I had to go to another meeting. But we got a lot of the input, and that's hundreds of pieces of input from all over the state, and had started the discussion, found out a little bit more about what the process has been, which we didn't know before. First of all, about 9 days ago, the restaurant people got together and had a subcommittee that came up with lots of recommendations and ideas. And then that was given to a health advisory board, separate from the medical one that they have that has county health officials and other people in it. And they reviewed all of that and came up with that 4 or 5 page document you saw, which was the draft. And so we reacted to the draft and kind of had explanations about what was going on and are awaiting to see what further happens. We have 3 other groups that have been meeting, which we haven't got the drafts yet: childcare, transit, and personal services. We hope to get those shortly. So that keeps going on. Churches came up repeatedly. So just so you know, there's a real push from all of those people that churches need to be conducive. So I'm happy they've got a work group going, and the Representative Post will be a part of that, because that's been true around our areas as well, figuring out how to get some of those places open. The other part of that conversation, which was nice to know, Employment Service was on this morning, said they now have 600 employees working on taking calls, plus another group that are looking at emails, that it's ramped up, and they are now actually ahead of the game. There are more people being approved than are coming in. So and with regard to the new group that the federal government did, those gig workers and the other people, we've gone from the first day they got 10,000 applications. They also know that many of the applications that they got that have not been approved yet in the original unemployment stuff really were people that should have been in this group. And so they're trying to get that straightened out. Of the 350,000, I think they have 80,000 that are still in that. We have to figure out what's going on in complex cases that not all 600 people can actually work on. So it was good information. They got 10,000 the first day, they got 20,000 the rest of the week. So they've got 30,000 people in that independent worker group that they're working on right now and trying to get post-dated back to the other information. So excited that they are ramping up and getting to the point where they're actually getting more out than the others. They said that they believe they have done 3/4 of all of the ones that have come in have been processed and are getting checks, which is, as they said, hundreds of millions of dollars back into the economy. And I do appreciate the fact that they have working and they're doing as hard as they can to keep up to date and get that stuff happening. Though, as we know, there's been a lot of other changes with regard to that. This morning, and I know that you guys aren't on it, but I talk about you guys a lot with regard to when I'm on these other meetings. We had a Chamber of Commerce coast-wide conference. It was on Facebook as well as us. Senator Merkley and Wyden showed up to talk about it. As Representative Gomberg has said, the coast is the hardest hit economically in this response because we are so dependent on tourism and they aren't there right now. So our hotels, all those businesses means we have really high unemployment. Merkley and them were very good in directly talking about the kinds of things they are doing. The one thing that I mentioned to the chambers is that those people in chambers who are not connecting to their county governments are missing the boat, and I wish they would get there. I mentioned this particular group in particular because I think it is important. They need to realize that part of what's happening is not from the state and it's not from the federal. It is from the county government. And so they need to be a part of those conversations with you. And I hope that more counties will do the same kind of thing that you're doing. So we mentioned that as well. But overall, I think a good attempt. A 1-hour meeting was clearly not enough time. And they didn't have the whole Coastal Caucus. They had the North and the South. So those of you who know Betsy Johnson, she was typically Betsy at the end, and she got to close out. So it was a good meeting for everybody. Those people who don't know Betsy now have a better understanding of who she is. So it was, and she's on the PPE kick right now, making sure everybody has enough PPE. And I do believe that there is a statewide issue of getting more and more buying it and figuring out how to get it out to places. So I think her consistent effort is working on that one. So I do think that the reason those medical regions were picked for regions is that it's availability of beds necessary if there is somewhat of an outbreak. And I absolutely agree with everybody that, you know, over 1/3 of all the cases are in nursing homes and or congregate care facilities. In Coos County, we've had 21 cases. They're all from one place, which is a part of our prison system, and we have a place where it's real dorms. They don't have individual rooms and not a lot of space. It's their last step before they're released. And we did have a situation where 2 of people were released. They put them in hotels, asked them to stay put, but these are people who don't always follow instructions well. So when they got the test back, the one who was negative was still sitting in a hotel. The one that was not negative was on the wind. They did find them in the next day or so to start having conversations about tracking down who they had come in contact with since leaving the hotel. But it makes counties very nervous when they're dependent on these large places where a lot of people are, and that's where their only outbreaks are. So we have acknowledged that about 1/3 of all of the cases in Oregon are coming from those situations. And so we need to keep that in mind as we move forward. So I guess that's pretty much all from me right now. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. I do think the people on the economic advisory team are taking it exceptionally seriously. And I heard a lot of conversations in Lincoln County and some other places in the last couple of days about how hard it would be to open up a restaurant given the spacing guidelines. And all of those things were addressed again. And the other one that has been very evident, there's a lot of business, but a lot of labor people. And everybody on those calls is really concerned about the workforce and making sure that they're safe. So figuring out, you know, we talked about they've not gone to edicting everybody has to wear a face mask, and restaurants don't want to have to control that. But a bunch of the restaurant people were saying, you should tell us we have to have all of our staff with masks. And then another one would say, well, maybe really strongly recommend. But so, I mean, there's a push and tug about whether it should be mandated or not. But the reality is, I think everybody agrees keeping people, especially the people that have to work there, safe is really important. And a couple of restaurant people said, we think everybody that walks in the restaurant should wear a mask. They can take them off when they eat, but when they're ordering and when they're talking to our staff, we would really rather they had some kind of face protection. And that doesn't mean these N95s. That means, just some kind of covering, because it would be helpful. So they are really good conversations. Absolutely. They are really good conversations. And I am pleased the governor is doing this, but it sounded to me it's going to be difficult for anybody to open within a week or so. But we have a lot of push from the southern coast counties, which are going to be some of the ones that are going to work on first, and Eastern Oregon, that they want to get going and get trying some stuff. And most of our counties down there, when they had put some restrictions on opening day parks and campgrounds and that kind of stuff, they're letting them expire, which is interesting. So we'll have to wait and see if that has an impact on people coming to visit. We were getting lots of visitors on the coast anyway, just so you know. And the problem is we're getting lots of visitors and no place for them to go to the bathroom. So they find places, and that's not necessarily healthy for our communities as well. So we know we need to figure out something as we move forward. And yeah, so I guess that's it, unless anybody has questions.
I only have one comment. I'm just going to interject that I was on a call where they were talking about the number of porta potty trailers per farm worker, and we may need to think about that with people going to the coast and bringing their porta potty with them. Anyway,
when we had the eclipse in Oregon, we had every porta potty in Idaho, Washington, and Oregon in our state. So yeah, you have to know that there are a limited number of them, and the ones that actually have water washing stations are even more limited. So
yeah, I actually keep 2 on the farm just in case. Joy has the next question, though. Thank you.
I have a question. So Senator Roblin, I thought I heard you say that we're not opening up in a week, but
I don't think the governor's stuff and the no plans that have come out would get us there in a week. But I have been surprised before. Generally, it's the other way around. But I anticipate. I know that county parks aren't going to. There are things that counties can do in the next week or so. But I'll be surprised if anybody gets approved to actually start phase 1 in the next week.
Okay. I had a member email me. Oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Excuse me. I had an email from a member asking me to take legal action against the state. So people are not happy. They are really frightened. They're upset. They want to get back to life, and I understand that. And I can hope. I guess I want to say, if we can make this move faster, and I know you're all on the same page with me, it would be great. So thank you for all you're doing. I understand.
I actually do believe that there are places around the state, if they did it right. I mean, the one thing that even Curry County was one of those that wanted to go fast, and then their cities all said, no, we're not quite ready yet. We're people are really nervous about coming out, and we're not sure that we're quite ready. So I hope that we can get going fairly quickly, because I agree with you. It's not just in your county, it's in almost every Eastern Oregon county, and all the southern counties that I represent are really anxious to get started. Roseburg sent a letter saying they wanted to open up on the 28th, and a couple other counties signed on to it with respect to certain things. So I absolutely agree with you, and the sooner the better. It's just, and I think the guidance is getting clearer and clearer. Though with the restaurant one, there's an awful lot of restaurants that say we can't open with this because there's no financial way of doing that. But they're hoping that we can get to phase 2 fairly quickly if we don't get any new cases, and then we can figure out some better ways to do the distancing stuff. Turn rate.
Senator and Joya, can I just jump in real quick? This is Mary Sterrett. On the governor's call this morning, they mentioned that they submitted plans which addressed all of the different private sectors as well as public health concerns. The submitted plans from the Eastern Oregon counties, since they're pretty much ready to go, and some of them don't even have any cases. We had assumed that they'd be opening this week. But according to the governor's office, they are projecting that those that are the plans that have already been submitted and have no cases, that even those aren't projected to be allowed to reopen until May 15th. So I think what we're looking at is it's going to be more protracted, even when you've checked all the boxes. And that's what's frustrating, not only to those counties, but to us, because we can't check all the boxes. So how much longer is it going to be for us?
Yep.
And I wanted to thank you, Commissioner. I wanted to make sure that we knew that Mayor Cape would like to ask a question next, but please feel free to address Commissioner Sterrett's comments.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, I think that's what I had heard, but I wasn't quite sure of that. So I appreciate her agreement with my idea that they were a little slower than I had hoped.
All right.
Yeah, so my question, Senator Roblin, you kind of touched on it, and it could go to any, the representatives as well that are on here. But reading through the draft sector guidance documents, there was a couple times where it was mentioned, if a business wanted to require face coverings, that they needed to check with their own legal authority, legal representation on if that would be legal, I guess, if they could do that. And I'm just wondering, is there a move to make that not a suggestion, or to move that to give businesses more authority, I guess, to refuse service to patrons who do not have face coverings? I've been in a lot of places, and people just are not just not having any kind of face coverings on, and so I just see that as a huge thing, and especially as we move forward and start looking at phase 2, and he's talking about churches and gatherings and schools and things like that. I really see the face coverings being something to be required, and much like no shoes, no shirt, no service, no shoes, no shirt, no face covering, no service type of a deal. And I think that could come from the wording in those guidelines. So just your thoughts on that.
I will tell you that there is a lot of pushback. Many of the restaurants would like it. Many of them would rather have it as a very strong suggestion. Some have said some of our cooking staff in the back should be wearing masks, but when it gets too hot, it's not necessarily healthy for people, and they don't like them fainting around stoves. So there are a lot of considerations that have to be considered, and I think what right now is happening is strongly recommended is the word. Costco, I know, just went to you don't get in the store without them. So I think that the issue is you can do that. You can put those kinds of signs up, and if you want to enforce it, whatever. But we don't really have enforcement and other kinds of stuff. And so restaurants and retail people are a little nervous about whether they have to have somebody at the door, keeping track of who went in, so they have and privacy. So there's a lot of those kinds of things that people think would be good to have, but I don't think the state wants to start regulating. So that's the question that's at the place. I agree. I don't leave the house without a mask personally, and or a face covering, because for me, it's not about me. It's about the people I come in contact with, in particular, those people who are working at grocery stores and pharmacies. Those are the ones I want to protect. I mean, I thank them every time I go to visit and get something, and I just think that it's respectful of me to care about them. So, but I agree.
All right, thank you, Senator. Michael, Mayor Cape, did you want to do any follow-up, or just a thumbs up? All right, thank you. I believe that Shannon Buckmaster has some questions for you as well, Senator.
Yes, and actually this is for any of our electeds on the call today, and it's related to the draft guidelines, but I want to shift the conversation a little bit. So I've been collecting the responses based on the draft guidelines, sticking to the 2 questions. Can you reopen under these conditions? If not, then why? Of course, people are eager to get involved in the process, so I'm learning a lot more about our businesses right now. And first of all, we do have several businesses who are scared to open because they are exposing themselves, their employees, and customers to this virus. They are scared of class action lawsuits if there's a gap and they open up and it's traced back to their establishment. There's also some concern too. I don't know if any of you saw the article from the New York Times that came out yesterday afternoon about Georgia, but in this process of opening, while it's possible for businesses to open, it's not always profitable for them to open. We're seeing that especially with restaurants and with childcare workers. So that has the risk of widening the economic gap between businesses that are already doing okay and the businesses who are struggling. So there are restaurants who are really struggling, would love to open, but they can't financially afford to with the reduction in customer base. We're also hearing that with childcare workers, that they would like to open, but they have to keep their same staffing requirements with fewer children. Fewer children enrolled in daycare or childcare means that they're not getting the overhead income to support their function. So you have a couple issues here, right? You have businesses who want to reopen and can't afford to reopen. There's also what we saw in Georgia this last week is that several of the businesses who did choose to reopen are now being boycotted, shamed, and are experiencing a different type of negative economic impact because they chose to go back for work, to work for the paycheck. So then we also have this cultural dynamic that we're going to really have to be careful about, especially in our rural communities where we have fear, we have economic desperation at this point, but we also may have this shaming element that's being introduced. And I'm already hearing that from our businesses in the last 48 hours. They're scared to open for safety. They're scared to open for public image. They're scared not to open because they need the revenue now. So I would love to hear from our elected officials. How are you aware of this conversation? How are you addressing this conversation? How are you adjusting the equitable access to customers or to these plans? And how are you receiving the communication? Because we also heard from the regional solution teams that our businesses don't have the chance to inform the drafts at this point. They can simply respond with those two questions, but there are not revisions being made to those drafts. I get it. At some point you have to call it and say, this is what we're doing, or this is not what we're doing. But that's also a point of frustration. So I just gave you like 6 things to respond to, but they're all relevant. Give us more information, please.
Senator Roblin, would you like to start?
All I say is, yes, I am hearing all of it. And we are trying to pass it on. As I tell people over and over again, we are not in session. We don't know when we're going to go in session, so we can't really help with much of that. And talking with our federal delegation, they are working really hard to start having a conversation about how do they get more money to these small businesses so that they can hang on, because they recognize that. And we gave a little bit of money because we didn't have much from our emergency board last week for those same companies, and they're trying to get a process where they can get that out to the people who are the most affected. But I think we're going to continue to need federal stimulus money for a lot of those places. I think if we can figure out a way to make people feel comfortable, if we get enough data from these other places that people aren't getting sick when they're getting, keeping the distancing and doing the other kinds of things. We can look at what's happening in other countries where they are coming back and doing some stuff so that people have more confidence. It'll be better for all of us. So it's trying to figure out how do we get information so that people can feel confident about being around other people again. So that's all I can say.
Yeah. Do any of the other elected officials would
Thank you,
like
Senator
to
Roblin.
add?
Yeah.
I would echo what he said. The emails that I can only go by the emails or calls. And we have been getting some calls at the office. Of course, we're not there. So we have to go through and listen to them and then respond. The emails and the calls I'm getting is, if they're from businesses, it's all about when is it going to open. I can't remember an email that I've received that wasn't about when can I open. And I can't answer their question. I don't know. I mean, we have the document from today is the newest news. It's been so frustrating to not be able to give some kind of, I'm used to being able to give a tangible answer. Do this. And the senator has far more experience than I do on this, but I don't know what to do. It's so frustrating. And then the other half, of course, is the employees that are calling me, help me get unemployment. Well, I can't. Right. I can send an email just like you can, and I will do that, and I have done that. It's so frustrating to just feel like your hands are tied. So, yeah, Senator, thank you. I appreciate all that you're doing too.
Thanks. Thank you.
Just to follow on, I'm hearing the same thing as well from our businesses. They want to open, they want to reopen, they want to reopen safely. The feedback that I've gotten in the last 48 hours is that these draft guidelines do not provide the solution for businesses to reopen the way that they need to financially or that they had intended to. So these draft guidelines may have unintended consequences that are not allowing our businesses and our state to reach the mutual goal of economic recovery. That's probably the most succinct way that I can express these concerns.
I will say that there are a number of groups that are working to figure out liability issues, which is another big one for everybody. And so I know that those conversations are happening, and that's something that would have to be done by the legislature at some point if we come back. So I know the conversations are happening. Dave?
Yeah. I guess, yo.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, everybody. You know, we've been at this for 52 minutes now. I feel like everything's been said, even if everybody hasn't had an opportunity to say it. A couple of things that I just wanted to touch on very briefly. First of all, you know, not all of our counties are in a hurry to reopen. Lincoln County has pushed back and kept their lodging closed through May. They have made it pretty clear they don't want to be the canary in the coal mine and find out what happens when people from other parts of the state with higher exposure rates, higher positive rates, come out to visit. So not everybody is in the same place here, and that makes the conversation a little more complicated. On the issue of putting people back to work, our WorkSource offices are doing heroic work getting people back to work, but I'm growing concerned that their funding formula is based on old numbers, and that the number of claims that they deal with, the unemployment in their region, may be substantially different today than it was 6 months ago, but their funding formula is based on those old numbers, and it's making it's giving them fewer resources to handle the increased caseload and demands on their offices. That's important. We've touched on restaurants and the challenges they're going to face in meeting these health guidelines. I think the health guidelines are well intended, but restaurants need to handle a certain number of clients to stay in the black, and reducing their clientele by 50% is going to keep everybody healthier, but not help them keep the doors open much longer if they're losing money every day that they are employing people to do those jobs. You know, I'm also concerned that in our tourist-rich communities, when we open up, that if our restaurants' capacity is limited by 50%, we're going to have a lot of hungry visitors foraging for food in neighborhoods because there aren't room for them in the restaurants that are available. And finally, the last thing I wanted to touch on is my frustration in learning that a lot of our establishments that host video poker are now being asked to pay for the machines that are in their establishments, even though the establishments are closed, and oh, by the way, the machines are turned off. That's a problem that we need to find a way to address. The other point that I'll mention very quickly regarding the corporate activity tax is that we have increased the threshold for having to pay your quarterlies. It used to be that if you made $5,000 or less, that you didn't have to pay your quarterlies. We have increased that now to $10,000 or less. I think that's going to be helpful for some of our smallest businesses that still make more than $1 million in activity a year and are being expected to make payments when they don't have any money coming in. So there's 5 very quick points for you in about 3 minutes. I'll take any of the really difficult questions that are left, or leave the remaining 3 minutes for anybody else that has a report for us.
There are some other folks here who I would love to hear from. So if unless you have a desperately burning issue. Okay, thank you very much, Representative Gomberg. I would love to go to Commissioner Olson, and then I want to catch some economic development folks and some federal folks here too. Commissioner Olson, what would you like to tell people today?
Well, Casey, I think the only thing I'd like to bring up today is a couple of things. Is I read some of the documents that came out yesterday regarding the openings. I don't understand them a lot because if I look at what was stated by the governor in her press conference yesterday, and I look at the statistics that OHA puts out, they're not the same. They're not even close to the same on certain specifics. So I don't know whether I understand. No, not me. So I don't know if I understand.
Sorry, I just had to
If
show
I
you, I got a
don't
phone call
understand
right
that
Senator
the
Artie
OHA's
Rowland.
wrong, the governor's wrong. Oh, we'll blame him. But that's the one thing, you know, that stats to me can be used for different things. In this case, the stats are the same. They can be used for different purposes. But with the press conference yesterday and the OHA report that came out this morning, the daily COVID report, they're not the same. And I have trouble with that. There seems like OHA to me, OHA is telling the story they want to tell, and the governor's telling the story that she wants to tell, but nobody wants to tell the same story. So I guess that's the only thing I'd like to know. And also, we're working on on the recreational openings. When I took a look at that, in the county, yes, we would like to read county parks. Unfortunately, like a lot of other counties, all of our maintenance is done by in-house work crews. Well, since we're not jailing as many, incarcerating as many people, and we're releasing people, we don't have any work crews, and we don't have any people on in our Parks and Rec to support that opening. So even though we would want to open physically for the county, we can't open them, even though we'd love to open them. So, and that's the only thing I'd like to share, Casey.
Okay. Thank you very much, Commissioner Olson. I'd love to go to Abhishek, and maybe if you have any updates on the exchange and how all of the work is going with dispersing the immediate relief grants and other things.
You bet. Thanks, Commissioner Kula. So first, I think maybe Representative Gomberg mentioned that it's kind of nice to go at the end after a natural conversation because most things have already been said, but I would like to reinforce a few of the responses we've received from businesses as reaching out to them in regards to the guidelines that have come out. Liability is a big issue, so thank you for recognizing that and bringing that up, Senator Roebland. There's a lot of concern around that, and so if we so choose to do this other thing, how does that make us liable? Another question that has come out is whether or not Oregon Health Authority or some other authority might be able to issue documents for the contact tracing sign-in log requirements. So if there's some sort of a standardized document coming from an authority that gives these businesses a sense of assurance, and they're requesting that sort of guidance where it's reasonable and makes sense and can be done in a template sort of a fashion. I'm also very concerned about the responses we've been receiving from our child care facilities. One of the ones that I think summarized it better was a gal who owns both in-home care facilities and actual, what do you call it, child care centers. And she said that these guidelines seem to have been written for the in-home care facilities and not the child care centers. My concern there, of course, is the fact that as people start going back to work, we need those child care centers to be up and opening and running. And she owns 4 facilities. 2 of them are in-home, 2 of them are centers. And she said she would not be able to open those centers and would probably only open 1 in-home facility because of the requirements of staffing. So alone, that would decrease her capacity significantly. And so that's a real big concern. We're hearing that from a lot of folks. Another thing we're hearing are that those guidelines are not necessarily aligned or cross-referenced. So there are some areas where food service, for example, has some requirements for separation by familial group or social group, and other areas like maybe a food court doesn't have that same language. And that disparity, there's a sense that it might create an inequitable economic position and or limit folks where that limitation isn't necessary in terms of the type of business that they can garner. I'm also curious whether there is a group that will continue to provide some sort of creative guidelines for these businesses. For example, we had a restaurant ask us, well, instead of having social distancing between two parties of 6 feet, could we put up plexiglass between the booth seats? So there's something that is blocking folks, but I can still utilize more of my space. And I think that these sort of creative yet reasonable safety guidelines, some folks are coming up with them, but not sure if they're fair to apply. Others are struggling to come up with these creative solutions. I know that from a industrial manufacturing perspective, OMEP has done a great job of putting together some shop floor guidelines that they're sharing out publicly. I don't know if others are doing that in some of these other business sectors, but a huge value if we can get that. I'm also getting a lot of requests from these businesses now that these guidelines are being posted even in draft form, reaching out to SEDCOR and our chamber partners looking for PPE. So they're in competition with everybody else in the world for PPE, and they're looking for local suppliers. We are making those one-on-one connections, and this speaks to Commissioner Kula's request for me to update folks in regards to the exchange. So SEDCOR is putting together an online exchange format. Unfortunately, and I apologize, I titled this a Craigslist sort of approach with my team, and that leaked out, so you may have heard that language used. You can blame me for that, I apologize, but we're now referring to it as an exchange. We just had a call before this one with our regional economic development partners, also with Business Oregon, and we're working to put together some sort of a strategy around also reaching out to commercial industrial distributors to make sure that they're looped in for those smaller businesses who maybe don't have the direct business benefit contact of a chamber or of a SEDCOR type of an organization to be able to access those resources through their. So connecting end users and distribution channels to local manufacturers. That's the intent of this exchange. We're currently developing it on the SEDCOR website. I saw the first draft come through yesterday, and it looks very usable. The interface looks quite usable, and I'm excited about it. We're hoping to have a test draft that we can use to populate some of our businesses and run through like an end user by midweek of next week, and hoping to have a final draft by the end of the week. So that's the timeline we're working on. We're very hopeful about it. And I certainly will be making that available to all of you as soon as it comes forward. I also want to real quick talk about the grant program. I'll go as quickly as I can. So on Thursday, which was, I guess, just yesterday, though it feels like a month ago, the Board of Commissioners for Yamhill County reviewed the grant committee recommendation for funding, and it was approved. So we are now following up with the 100 grant awardees, and will, I believe that county staff has already started reaching out to folks today. So awardees and non-awardees will be hearing from the county by end of day Monday, and probably before then. Most of them will probably be getting a notification by end of day today. And we'll be working very quickly to expedite those checks to those 100 awardees. We're really excited about that. And those were $2,500 small grants to small businesses of less than 15 FTE. And this is bridge kind of gap money. I also wanted to let folks know that last I heard, First Federal Bank still has a grant program available for 501c3 nonprofit organizations. We've been trying to share that out with our nonprofit partners. And to the best of my understanding, Safe Corporation still has their grant program open and available to folks who are their policyholders who are looking for funding to continue to improve safety around COVID-related safety requirements for their employees. So they initially funded that at $10 million. That went very quickly. Their board was generous enough to refund it at an additional $15 million. They've been receiving applications and are currently processing them, but I believe they're also still accepting applications. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And just to make sure that we get everybody in, I'd love to then go to, unless there are questions, love to go to Mayor Witoski of Dayton.
Sure. I wanted to make a comment on Commissioner Olson's report on the parks. I know my community is really anxious to get the Dayton Landing Park open, and I do only want to point out, I mean, I actually am very sympathetic to the need for work crews and maintenance. The commissioners on the line here are very well aware of my complaints with that park, generally related to maintenance and upkeep. And we all know those crews are not going out to Dayton Landing Park. There are no facilities. So it would just be really great if people could get access to the river. I would think that as families are traveling in their boats, they are very likely to be staying 6 feet apart at a minimum, unless they are playing bumper boats on the river. So I think, any access we can get, any support we can get for reopening that facility, I think would be really well received in my community. And there are no restrooms. There are no facilities that the county routinely maintains at that park, and so it wouldn't be a strain on those labor forces. And if you'd rather not, you can always release that park to the city of Dayton. Now you can both giggle, and our staff will gladly pursue the funds to properly repair it. Now that I've slammed you guys on that again, which is going to continue until that park is fixed, I also want to provide a little bit of an update for YCAP. YCAP was able to work with the Yamhill County Health and Human Services to develop an expansion of some available beds. So the county commissioners, we really, really appreciate that support. And that was approved yesterday. My report this morning from the executive director is that 16 of 20 of those new beds are already filled. That was largely a process with clients that we were already working with from about mid-March, with the expanded hotel project as well. There've already also been some really good results from that project, some exits that we can kind of brag about. So some folks who had been unhoused for quite some time have gone into chemical dependency treatment programs, various mental health programs, and are otherwise being housed. So that's really great. Fewer people on the streets, which limits their risk. And those additional beds we are placing kind of ordered by some vulnerabilities, particularly to COVID-19. And so we're trying to make sure that we are housing folks who are older, who have underlying health conditions, and getting them placed first. And so that has just been, I'm just very pleased. I'm really happy to have those available beds in Yamhill County. In general, of course, I would like to see unhoused people placed into safe and secure housing, but especially during a pandemic where some of that population is of significantly high risk, I'm really happy to have them off the streets and somewhere safe. We have an additional 22 households, I think it's 22 right now, being housed through the moteling program. And so that's also 22 families who are not on the street being exposed to additional risk. So that's the update I have.
I have a comment for Mayor Wojtowski, my friend Beth. A couple of years ago, we talked about, turning that park. Turning the park over to the city of Dayton. And to this day, I don't understand why it's the only county park we have that's within the city limits of a city, why that park wasn't given or to the city of Dayton. Let them work with the Marine Board and let them work with that. So that I have to agree with.
Preaching to the choir, Rick. I've been saying it for years.
Yeah, I know. That's been I have too.
Let's sign some paperwork. I'm a very good document drafter.
You are. But anyway,
Thank you, Commissioner Olson, for that follow-up.
I thought I'd just say, yeah,
meanwhile, Commissioner Kula would like you to stop talking about the park.
Yeah, you can bash Casey. That's all right. I still think it should be a city park.
I just want to make sure that this is not a public meeting. That's all.
That's fair. That's fair.
Can I ask a quick question about, and I think this would be for the county, but regarding the moteling program, are you participating in the FEMA reimbursement program for counties? I can't hear you.
Great question. I was actually pretending to not talk, so that's a fantastic question. It's something that I brought up at our meeting yesterday, the FEMA reimbursement, because Shannon, I don't remember her last name, and the governor's office indicated that this would be a perfect thing for reimbursement through FEMA.
Yeah.
So we directed our staff member or county staff to make sure that all the boxes were checked and the T's were crossed so that it could be reimbursed. Exactly. And then we work with YCAP and with the city of McMinnville in order to make sure that there's also, we're gonna work. But if you know more.
Okay, and let us know if you need help connecting with FEMA or anything like that. Happy to help out with that.
Okay, that sounds good. I also want to note that the YCAP project, which I'm super excited about, also hits one of our criteria in the draft or the final draft prerequisites for reopening in a regional specific manner. So, you know, we're crossing a lot of checking a lot of boxes right now, I think, with that one. All right, thank you very much, Mayor. Mayor Cape, what would you like to tell people in your community now?
Yeah, just going through those guidelines that came out, you know, reading through the ones for outdoor recreation, I have a hard time thinking that like all of our city park would be able to meet those requirements. I think our walking trail, very likely we could do something with that. But the picnic areas and the playground and restrooms, you know, that's going to be harder for us, especially with the twice daily cleaning guidelines and, you know, the staffing to do that, and the garbage and hand washing stations. You know, I just think that's going to be more long term before we could get to that point. You know, and then kind of going back again, not to rehash something, but the face coverings things, you know, looking at it from an employer standpoint, you know, and the city does employ workers, you know, and so how do we go through those guidelines, and again, those physical distancing requirements can be difficult for, I think, some employers. Some of the places I've been in, some businesses do a great job with it that have been able to stay open. Some businesses have more difficulties with that. The contact tracing requirements is going to be, that's going to be so difficult. And the health checks to visitors, you know, I think, and some of those facility upgrades as well is going to be difficult. So and for the city, I think that's going to be tough too, you know, and how can we do that with our employees and our facilities? How can that work? So, and then just real quick update where we're at with Salem Kaiser schools is we're starting to shut down some of our facilities. You know, we're the schools that are being used as food distribution sites are still open for that limited access, but other facilities are getting shut down. So we're going through some of our end of year checkout procedures and then closing some of those facilities that we can close to meet those requirements. You know, for example, we just got a new policy that came out to start today to check employees, ask them those 3 essential questions about their health and before they're allowed to enter a facility, and part of that is the contact tracing, and so we are working forward with some of that. But to help ease that burden, we're closing down some of our facilities. So that's really kind of the biggest thing that we got going. So other than that, I think next week is going to be a busy, difficult week for us, for our city. We have a really big council meeting. So.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Speaking of next week's being busy, this should like pop up Stacy's attention. Stacy from Merkley's office was commenting that next week will be busy too for Congress. So tell us why.
Sure. Well, we just sent Senator Merkley back to DC to start the session on May 4th, where they will start in earnest the negotiations on the 4th coronavirus package. The senator's overarching goals are going to be to, 1, expand and improve the small business programs, more money, make sure the ag producers can actually benefit from the program. So we got that into coronavirus, the CARES 3.5, but now there's no applications being taken for EIDL. So in effect, agriculture producers cannot apply for EIDL. And we want to make sure that truly small and minority-owned businesses without deep bank connections can get money. The second is a nationwide moratorium on utility shutoffs. Third would be a real plan for federal leadership on widespread testing and contact tracing so we can get back to regular life-ish. He also wants to get money for voting by mail so nobody faces the potential life or death choice to exercise their right to vote. And then the fifth priority is more money, more flexible money specifically for state, local, and tribal governments. We know that your revenues are, in bad shape, and so we don't want essential services for Oregonians to get cut when they need them the most. So that's our goal next week. And then, yeah, Casey, if you connect with me regarding FEMA, if you need any connection to there. And then I'm also about to loop back to you regarding the businesses that Scott Hill with McMinnville business. Not Scott Hill, Scott.
Cooper.
Yes, thank
Scott
you.
Cooper. Okay, great. Sounds good. All right, thank you very much, Stacy. All right, last, or penultimate, Joya Goodwin from the McMinnville Chamber of Commerce. I'm sorry to leave you to the last, but look at that, David Gomberg. Woo! All right.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thanks everybody. So appreciate everybody on these calls. I actually look forward to them because they're a great source of information for me, and of course connection, and I appreciate that. So thank you, Commissioner, for putting these together. Visit McMinnville is putting together a campaign called Our Roots Run Deep, and it's really designed to get our businesses, I love the duck, thank you, our businesses to support each other and to get, a lot of our community supporting our businesses as well. And we're also looking at a B2B plan for business to business so that they can talk to each other and sell to each other. Farmers Market is opening up soon. It's going to be a drive-through farmers market. So you will order in advance and then you will get your product. We've been updating our businesses on a lot of all of this stuff that's been happening. It is 100 miles an hour. And we're doing our best to collect information and forward that to our legislators, to Representative Noble, of course, and the governor's office. And that's something that Jody Christensen had asked us to do. We had a meeting today about Turkey Rama. We are looking at how we might make it different. So that, which is exciting to think that we're not going to be doing booths on the street, but we've got some ideas on that. So more as that's coming around. Lemonade Day is still going to happen because kids can set up a booth at their house and people can drive-by lemonade. So we don't want to not have that again. Mac Water and Light is offering businesses the opportunity, if you're not in your business right now, to terminate your service, and you can terminate your water or you can terminate electric or both. And then when you go back, there will be no reconnection fee. So we've been telling our members about that. First Federal, I know Abisha mentioned that they got an additional $15,000. So there were 5 more not-for-profits that will get $3,000 a piece. And we are going to be asking our local breweries, if you have not already done this, Commissioner Kula, to see if they would be making some hand sanitizer. And that was an idea that came out of our Stable Table, which is our economic development organizations, the Chamber, MEDP, the Downtown Association, the city, and, excuse me, Visit McMinnville. I also want to point out that this is a mask that I got right here in town from RPAMS, and they also make one that is slightly more expensive than this one that I also bought, that I wore to the grocery store yesterday. I haven't been to a grocery store in 4 weeks, and I was so happy to go to the grocery store because I had a mask that worked. The other thing that I just picked up today, and I'm one of the first people to have it, this is a UVC light. They are making these. It is a prototype. I'm one of the first people to have one, and I am so excited because you just turn it on and you disinfect everything. The UVC kills it all. So these are available soon. They're going to be available, and the masks are available now. They're making them. So if you need those things, let me know, and I will put you in touch with Terry Wilmuth, because very nice guy, really nice little company right here in Mac. That's the end of what I have to say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Joya. Does anybody have questions for Joya? Well, you covered like everything that's going on in McMinnville around coronavirus. So thank you. All right. I just wanted to say one last thing. Shannon Buckmaster's question, the big question that Senator Roblin did answer in part, was about how to do that dance and the balance between businesses being scared to reopen but needing to reopen. And I thought about that as I was listening to you, and I was realizing that having a unified, strong message of like elected officials, we've got your back, and we'll listen to you and we'll help you as best we can. I think is one of the best approaches. But in our community, I'm also going to go with we need to have really, really clear public health criteria and then hold to them and then move forward from that, rather than, as Commissioner Olson was worried about, the mixed messages of whose numbers are we using. Is that strong criteria and then a unified message around supporting businesses and workers. That's the only thing I can think of. So, but I'm here with you, and I want to say that everybody else here on the call is working on behalf of people in Yamhill County and Oregon. So with that, thank you again very much, and go Vikings. Sorry, had to do it. I will see you next Tuesday in a different world.
Again, thank you.
Thank you so much.